Hello and welcome to Unit Session 2 of Unit 4 Public Policy and Debt Management. In this session, we'll be looking at the overview of some major public policies in Ghana and their rationales. We might be very familiar with most of these policies since most of them are from the current government. Some of the policies they've implemented so far since they are coming into power. So by the end of the session, we would be able to identify major public policies in Ghana. We will be able to link the public policies to the types of policies that we have discussed in session 1 of Unit 4 and also provide a rationale for these public policies in Ghana. So let's start with the very first public policy, that's the Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program, right? So most of us might be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, which are goals that the countries, right, most countries who form part of this particular global organization, that's the United Nations, would want to achieve by the end of 2030, right? So as part of these goals, there is one of the goals which looks at eradication of poverty, right? It looks to alleviate poverty in all its forms by 2030, right? So government introduces policies in order to achieve this objective, which they are also a part of that. They've signed off to such a program, so they have to implement policies to ensure that they achieve this particular one. Now, how do government do that? That's by having this particular policy, that's the Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program, right? Now the government introduced it in order to have a direct capital expenditure project in these local and rural areas, right? So here the government tries to build most of infrastructure in most of these rural areas, right? The other policy here is the free public senior high school policy, right? So this was a promise that the incumbent government gave while like we come to have the election in 2016, and after he was elected and he came to power, he actually implemented that policy, that is the free senior high school policy. But before that, there used to be a free senior high school education policy, which is enshrined in the 1992 constitution. But then, due to some factors and some happenings, this particular policy lost its shape a bit. But then this government reintroduced it in the senior high school. Remember, most of our basic schools are already free, right? That's the government one, most of them are already free, but then the senior high school still had some people like were still paying fees. So the government added the senior high school as part of the free education policy program, right? So this particular policy, right? So as you look at the types of policies, which in session 1 we talked of the distributive and the other one. So this one falls under that particular type of policy, right? So this also forms part of the Sustainable Development Goals, right? There is one of the goals which clearly state that the free and quality education for all, right? So by the end of by 2030, most countries should have free and quality education for all its citizens, that we should be able to achieve some level of literacy by 2030. So the government introduces this policy geared towards that particular goal or objective. Yeah. The next policy is fighting corruption, which is the government has put in place several measures to fight against corruption, including the use of EOCO, economic organized crime operations, right? So this particular policy is a means of trying to eradicate corruption from most of these public institutions and also in government, right? So they have the Office of the Special Prosecutor, other eligible offices which seek to help fight corruption to its barest minimum, right? We also have the Akufo-Addo program for economic transformation. This is a president's plan to drive economic wide growth by fundamentally transforming Ghana's economy to create jobs and prosperity for all Ghanaians. There is also the Nation Builders Corps, which is a program to help the youth, mostly the graduate unemployed youth, to actually get some something to do, right, after they've graduated from their various universities. Right. There is also the infrastructure through PPP, which is a public-private partnership. So the government mostly goes into the public-private partnership to ensure that he's able to develop more infrastructure in the country. No, him alone, the government alone may not be able to bridge this infrastructure gap. So he goes into partnership with these private entities to develop this infrastructure. Right. Then we have the Ghana Beyond Aid policy, which was a policy by the current government upon the election. Then he introduced this particular policy as also a means to an end. Right. Then we have the Ghana School Feeding Program. Right. So the school feeding program, also a program by the government this was introduced a bit long ago, right, to actually feed or have free meals for students in our basic schools, right? So in most of government schools there are feeding programs going on there, and then these students take free meals as part of government's program to eradicate hunger and also to motivate students who might not have something to actually attend schools to improve the literacy rate in the country. Right. There is also the Ghanaian Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program, the LEAP program, right? So most of these programs, as I said, are geared towards achieving the objective of the Sustainable Development Goals. And as we've already discussed the types of public policies in Unit 1. So we may be able to link these policies in Ghana to the policies that we've already explained in Unit 1, right? So remember we talked of the capitalization policy, the redistributive policy, the regulatory policy, the distributive policy, and also the substantive policies, right? So we will be able to link these policies of the country to these types of policies, right? The next one is the Ghana National Health Insurance Scheme, which was a policy to help tackle the failure of the out-of-pocket fee services system, right? So as first, when you go to the hospital, you have to have money on you, so you pay for the services that you are going to acquire from the hospital. But then it looked like that particular policy wasn't helping. What if there is an emergency and then we rush somebody to the hospital and the person has no funds on him, and then those who send the person, they do not have enough funds to cater for that particular health cost? Then would the person have to die? No. So there is the National Health Insurance Scheme policy to actually help solve this one. So if you are sick or there's an emergency, the only thing you need on you at that moment should be your health insurance card. That is, if you have one and if you are registered on that policy. Okay. So and in a summary, we've looked at major policies in Ghana currently and like why those policies are in place. So as I said, these policies are all geared towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals that we expect to achieve by the end of 2030. Right. This is a policy goal. These are objectives which were signed and approved during one of the UN meetings, right? So these particular policies in Ghana now are geared towards achieving that objective. Remember, we said policies are objective oriented, right? It's a means to an end. So the end here is achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and the means here are the policies that the government introduces. Okay, so let's take some few minutes to recap. And as you are recapping, try to link these policies that we've discussed to the types of policies that we discussed in Unit 1 as well, and then see if you would be able to align them